I'm Kristin Ward, and welcome to Maquette Vallant's Summer of Stories. If you're enjoying the show, please like, share, or subscribe below. You can also help keep the stories coming by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/mvstorydance. Support from patrons like you helps me upgrade my equipment, offer stipends to special guests, and even pay myself for some of the 30-plus hours that go into each episode. In return, you'll get access to special behind-the-scenes footage, photos, special downloads, and more. Tonight's story is The Race, and it is my own take on the Greek story of Atalanta. Atalanta was a wonder woman in her time, often the only woman among the strong and brave heroes. I wanted to tell the story from her own perspective, nodding to details that are in the older texts, but also with the feeling that I had as a kid listening to the empowering version of her story in Free to Be You and Me. For my fellow folklore nerds, I'll post some resources in the comments below. Atalanta poised herself at the starting line, stretching her limbs and focusing on the race ahead. She caught a suitor's gaze out of the corner of her eye, hopeful and determined, and remembered the room full of men she had entered years ago. The king of Caledon had assembled them, a band of heroes tasked with killing the massive boar that terrorized his country. The men had hushed as she walked in to join them, her head held high and her hand steady on her bow. All but one had resented her presence. Yet when the boar crashed through their ranks and their lives had been at stake, Atalanta had more than proven her place among them. Now she must prove herself again. This time not to save the lives of others, but to claim her right to live her own as she wished, unmarried and unfettered. A trumpet sounded, and while Atalanta's mind stayed elsewhere, her body sprang into action. Running came as naturally to her as breathing, and she easily set pace before her suitors. In her infancy, her father had abandoned Atalanta for the crime of having been born a girl, leaving her at the mercy of nature. And nature had shown mercy. A she-bear had found Atalanta in the forest, cared for her, kept her warm, and raised her to be strong, fierce, and swift as one of her own cubs. Atalanta remembered the freedom and simplicity of those early days, learning how to hunt and fish, climbing trees and racing barefoot through the forest for no other reason but the sheer joy of the wind in her hair. Now, the same father who had discarded her wished to marry her off, like a rare jewel, only desirable once polished. Thunk! Something bright rolled into the path ahead, breaking Atalanta's reverie. A golden apple. She felt a strange kinship to it, precious yet discarded, and without thinking, barely slowing, she scooped it up, holding it gingerly in her hand as she ran on. Dust clouds licked at Atalanta's heels as the miles flew by. One by one, her suitors began to drop away. The young man she had spotted at the starting line, Hippo something, kept pace not far behind her, faltering only slightly. She picked up speed to put extra space between them. Her thoughts returned to the Caledonian boar, and Atalanta wondered if this is what it felt like to be pursued by the best and bravest men and women of Greece. For the first time she could understand its rage, and she almost felt sorry for it. It had killed 3 men that day before her expertly drawn arrow pierced its eye, before Meleager's sword finished its rampage. Meleager had been a good man, a good partner. And if he had wanted more from her, he never pressed. She respected him for that. and for the way he had stood up for her after the hunt, insisting that she be granted the trophy of the boar's hide. He had died for that, a victim not of sword but of a curse of the fates, and while she grieved, she knew she would eventually catch up to him in the underworld. In the meantime, she had adventures to embark on, and before that, a race to win. Thunk. The sound was softer this time, and up ahead, just off the path, lay another golden apple. She sneaked a glance back. Most of her suitors had long been left in her dust. Hippomenes, that was it, was still far behind, but something in his confidence unnerved her. Still, she had time for a quick detour. The apple gleamed only a little distance from the path, maybe a little further than she thought, but it had been a long time since she'd lost Meleager and the hide, and the fates owed her some restitution. Atalanta rejoined the race to find that Hippomenes had gained on her. Retrieving the second apple had cost her more time than she had planned for, and now both apples felt heavy in her hands. She had to focus now, or she would be forced to marry the young suitor who'd tired only slightly as he closed in behind her. On she raced, glancing back every so often to meet the man's gaze and unflinching smile. They were on the final stretch of the race now, and for a moment she saw something gold flash in his hand. The apples, of course. This was his doing. Aphrodite, goddess of love, had been outraged that Atalanta, a mortal woman, would not wish to marry, and must have given Hippomenes the apples he threw to distract her. Cheater, she thought, but couldn't help but be impressed. It took some bravery to ask for help from the gods, especially one as fickle as Aphrodite. Thump. Almost on cue, the third apple landed, this time even further off the path than before. She slowed a little, contemplating it. If Hippomenes had gotten the apples from a goddess, then these must be the same golden apples that grew in the garden of the Hesperides. Many mortals had tried and failed to claim even one. Hercules himself had almost been stuck holding the very sky in order to obtain his share. Now 3 had simply been tossed to her. Were they a trick or a bribe? And if they were a bribe, in exchange for what? Settling down? Finally adhering to what was expected of her? To be a good woman, a good wife, a good mother? She peeked again at Hippomenes, who was gaining on her. He was handsome, strong, determined, and had gone to great lengths to win the right to marry her. If she had to marry a man, she could certainly do worse. Atalanta veered slightly off the path towards the third apple. So what if she settled down? She would no longer be pursued by suitors, dismissed by men less brave than she, scoffed at by other women for not following the path. It would be so easy. No more perilous quests, no more ferocious beasts or nights alone under the stars. The third apple was just a few yards away on one side, and her race to win herself on the other. She had never had an easy life. What would she possibly do with one now? She took a breath, closed her eyes, and dropped the apples she held. No longer burdened with the extra weight, Atalanta found a surge of new energy and sprinted back towards the path and into the race, just meters behind Hippomenes. She caught up to him, neck and neck, just as they crossed the finish line. Her clever suitor was focused ahead, so sure of himself that he did not even realize the race had been a draw. And as Hippomenes veered to the right, towards the cheering crowds to proclaim the story of how he had won the great Atalanta, she chose the path to the left. with nothing more to prove to herself, the sun on her face and the wind in her hair, out of her story and into her life.
Working on this story and filming on such a beautiful, cool day inspired me to get outside and get in some exercise of my own. Of course, we can't all be Olympic athletes like Atalanta, but there are lots of ways we can enjoy moving our bodies in fresh air. Do you like to walk, swim, jog, run, dance? I would love to hear about it. Leave a comment below or post on Facebook or Instagram with hashtag MV Summer of Stories. Even Atalanta had trouble staying in the race without friends around to support her. It's hard to stay motivated, especially when you are trying to juggle past hurts and others' expectations. To get an idea of how running in a non-competitive setting can help people today, I called on Jennifer McNabb, one-time reluctant runner turned enthusiast. Jennifer is originally from West Virginia, but now resides in Pittsburgh and is a mostly faithful runner with the Pittsburgh-based group People Who Run Downtown.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Tell us a little bit about People Who Run Downtown and how we can find out about it.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, the group started in 1986, and the founder of the group is named Dale Schwab. We call him the grand poobah of the group. And Dale was on a business trip in Detroit and went running one night and found a whole bunch of people. They were meeting at a restaurant. So he ran with them and then he tried to find them again and couldn't. And then he found a newspaper article about them. And they met every Tuesday at a different restaurant. And when he came back to Pittsburgh, he was like, we need something like this here. So he started the group in 86 and the structure remains the same. We meet every Tuesday night. We meet at 5:45, we run at 6, and we meet at a different restaurant or bar around. We try to move to different spots around the city. Someone will bring a map, but we also post the maps on our Facebook group. And the Facebook group is just People Who Run Downtown. And we have a website that's pittsburghrunning.org. And we do a map for 4 miles and 6 miles, and people can run or walk. And we just meet up together. You take a map, you run or you walk, and we all meet back at the same restaurant at the end to, have a drink together, eat together, and get to know each other. So it's really fun. We did take a break this last year for COVID, which is the only break that we've had, but we started back up in June, meeting in outside spots. So we aren't going to restaurants right now. We're trying to be mindful of COVID, and people are just bringing camp chairs and we're hanging out together afterwards that way.
Atalanta was pretty ahead of her time, and often she was the only woman in the room. But what do the demographics of running groups look like today?
I feel like running has become something that everybody is doing now. At our group, I can speak to it. We have people of all ages. I mentioned people are running and walking. So sometimes people who maybe were injured will walk for a while, or people that just like walking come and walk. But we have men, we have women, people are all ages. We have really fast runners that come. They're training for races, and I never see them. They start at the very beginning and they're back and changed, and sometimes leave before I even finish my run. So, but we have mixed demographics, and it's a great place to meet people and find people that run your own speed. And I sort of found my running tribe through the group.
So as we were setting up the interview, you mentioned that you got into running a little bit later in life. So what advice can you give to others who might be just starting out?
Yeah, I come from a place of not engaging in any sports. As a youngster, I used to have my teachers write notes for me to get out of gym class. So I was sort of against the notion of it altogether. But I came to running because I was going through a rough patch in my life, and my sister and a bunch of these great women runners in West Virginia got me into it. And sort of, I would drive them to races. They were doing a lot of destination races, and I would be the driver. And they kept telling me I would be running soon, and I never thought I would do it. I was so resistant because picking them up, dropping them off, getting coffee it seemed like the best way to live your life. But I started running with them. And ran my first half marathon with them. It's something that you definitely can do. I never thought I would be able to run a 5K, and then I ran one. I never thought I could run a mile, and then I ran one. And then I never thought I could run a 5K. And then I ran the Pittsburgh Marathon in 2015. I never, ever thought I would run a marathon. Once you start, if you just keep at it, it's something within you that you can do. It's an amazing sport. It's such a great, I always get emotional when I think about like that first half marathon, that you are able to do something you never thought you would be able to do. And you push yourself, but you also listen to your body and know what you can do. And so I think if you're just starting out, it's hard at first. Like I remember my first runs and being really mad about it. Why can't I just run as fast as I want, as far as I want? But it's, running teaches you patience, and it teaches you so many things. And it's all worth it at the end if you just put in the time and keep at it.
In the version of the story I just told, Atalanta was able to finish the race really only after she let go of the apples and the expectations that were distracting her. How has running helped you let go of stressors that are holding you back?
It helps in so many ways that you never think about. Like I started running thinking this would be great for my physical health, which it was, but you don't realize how powerful running is for your mental health. Like after a run, I mean, I always heard people talk about runner's high, and I still don't know if I've had like what I would call a runner's high, like where I feel like, euphoric, but I do feel good. And I feel like so many times when I run, whether it's with friends or by myself, I might be fixating on a problem, or there's something stressful in my life. And, I'm like, I don't want to do this run. And you start the run. And by the end, that problem seems so small. Like it puts things in perspective. It like smooths everything out. So and sometimes I forget about it. I'm like, I'm just going to go for a run. And then you realize, well, this has cleared my mind. It's, makes your energy better. It's just, it's such a positive thing in so many ways.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
And thank you for watching. If you enjoy the show, please like, share, or subscribe below. You can also keep the stories coming by joining us at patreon.com/MV Storydance. I'll see you next week for episode 4. In the meantime, you can catch missed episodes right here.